Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Mystic Junkies podcast, the history and mystery comedy show. And today we're continuing our series on cults. I hope you've been following along and enjoying our content so far. We've had a lot of fun with this, I think, right, guys? We've
absolutely
done a lot of, found out a lot of new things about cults. And this one's no different, but kind of is, because when we've covered some of the other cults, they all kind of follow a similar path, and they have the same kind of motives and stuff like that. And this one's a little bit different, I feel like. It's the Manson Family, which, I'll be honest with you, I didn't think of them as a cult until we started doing this series, but they definitely are a cult. Without a doubt. In fact, some people describe them as a gang as well.
Oh yeah, I
would
say that.
They participated in very much gang-like activity as well. Right. And but yeah, I think that this one's a little bit different. They kind of had different motives. Even the leader himself, Manson, I feel like he was a different kind of a cult leader. Definitely had this big idea, which was to incite a race war. And he openly was saying that to his constituents and stuff like that. But yeah, let's start at the beginning.
Well, Charles Manson, he always had a troubled childhood. He was born in 1934, spent much of his life in juvenile reformatories or in prison for crimes such as petty larceny, armed robbery, burglary, and auto theft. And actually, he was just released from prison in 1967 when he moved to San Fran, and that's when he started to attract a small following. And I guess he would attract people with teachings on the occult, as well as science fiction, and what's called fringe psychology.
Fun.
And I had to look up what fringe psychology means, because I'm like, that's so broad and vague at the same time, right? So it's when things are based more on conclusion than knowledge. Fringe psychology. So he preached about the apocalyptic race war, and his hold on his followers was so strong that they would carry out several murders on his orders. And one of the most famous that we've all probably heard about in some form or another was in 1969. The most famous victim was actress Sharon Tate. And she was the wife of film director Roman Polanski.
Right. And
they were killed in their very lavish and very expensive LA home, along with 3 other guests that were staying with Sharon. It all went down in the summer of 1969. Roman, her husband, was actually out of town. He was in Europe, probably filming something, and she was 8 months pregnant. So she stayed home. They had their guests, which both Roman and Sharon were friends with, and that was Wojciech Frykowski, as well as his girlfriend, which was the coffee heiress Abigail Folger. They were staying with Sharon. So Sharon also had a celebrity hairstylist that was also hanging out that evening.
Okay.
One of the unfortunate things was when these members of the family arrived to the property that night, they had encountered a man by the name of Stephen Parent. He was an 18-year-old who, this is so unfortunate, but he was just visiting the estate's caretaker in the guest house when he was approached by these people, and they shot Stephen to death.
Sheesh.
He was just visiting.
Wrong
he was just
place,
on
wrong
the premises, and then he got shot to death. They were approaching the main house, and they gathered all the people into the living area. So that was Sharon, the 2 house guests, and Jay Sebring. And they tied Sharon and Jay Sebring together, ropes around their necks. Sebring was shot and stabbed to death. Frykowski and Folger somehow managed to free themselves and were running away. They were fleeing the house when they were chased down and killed, like in the front yard or in the driveway. And then
so they
finally,
were there to finish the job. They weren't
there to mess around. Supposedly, I guess Charles had told them to kill everyone inside as gruesomely as they could.
Yes.
That's
to
terrifying.
Send a message, right?
Yeah.
So it was for a message.
Yeah.
All right.
It was something.
Didn't they drew a message in blood?
They did. I don't know if she was the last one who was killed, but Sharon was fatally stabbed. Again, she was 8 months pregnant, so that's just so sad. And her blood was used to write the word pig on the front door.
It was Susan Atkins who wrote that. I'll tell you about her later.
Okay.
Apparently, Charles Manson was very familiar with the property because it was formerly owned by Terry Melcher, who had earlier considered him for recording contract, but then later decided against it.
Right.
So
Yeah,
maybe it was also like a vindictive thing, like a vengeful thing, because he was mad that he didn't get a recording contract. But he was familiar because Terry used to own that house. And I guess by the end of the year, all of the killers had been arrested. The trial of Manson and his followers attracted obvious national attention. In 1971, Manson and all of his, the 4 murderers, his followers, were sentenced to death. But a weird law changed in 1972 in California, so capital punishment was then changed to life in prison.
Okay.
They requested parole, which of course it was denied.
Denied, absolutely.
Obviously, right? So these murders have inspired numerous books and Hollywood movies.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
It's just funny to request parole when you carved a swastika in your forehead. You know,
Yeah, it's like
tough.
on what grounds, sir?
Yeah,
On
not
what
really gonna
grounds?
board meeting. You know.
Right.
Wow. You mentioned his past. Was there any real violent crimes that he was arrested for before any of this stuff? 'Cause I saw like petty theft, like grand larceny, stuff like that.
He shot a guy in the
Theft Auto.
stomach once. That
Okay.
was a little.
pretty-
That was a
that's
little
violent.
rough. Let's. If you got, and I think it's going back to, how do you end up with a Charles Manson?
Right.
Well, you end up with a Charles Manson because you have a child who has been physically, emotionally abused since he was born. His mother was 15 years old when he was born. He never knew his father. His mother was an alcoholic. I don't know that she particularly abused him, but she abandoned him. And he ended up living with an aunt and uncle. And at a very early age, as Twee already said, he was already committing enough petty crimes and things like that he was constantly in and out of some type of detention center.
As a kid?
As a kid. From the time he was a kid, he was in these detention centers. And back then, these detention centers were horror shows.
Yeah.
There's stories of him being raped, multiply raped, beaten, by not only other kids and the inmate, the kids, but actually with the help of the
People of authority.
the
and
people
stuff.
of authority that were there. So this is you can see how this is a child that grew up in a way that there's no empathy because he was never, he doesn't even know what that is.
Right.
So there's no empathy for him. So this is a kid that is just trying to survive. By the time he was 13, 14 years old, he was escaping every time he could escape. Anytime he could get out, he was getting out and living on the streets. And of course,
He was
being
severely
being a
antisocial.
criminal to live
Yeah.
on the streets. So he's just in a sense trying to survive. And of course that brain is just being scrambled.
Yeah, fight or
And
flight always.
Fight or
Yeah.
flight always.
Yeah.
And he's smart enough. They found that he had a above average. He wasn't no genius, but above average intelligence. He was
His IQ was 109.
yeah,
Specifically.
So he's smart enough, to.
He was illiterate too. Did you know that?
Yes.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah,
He
because
wasn't in school.
Yeah, he
There
never
was
went
no-
to school.
Yeah, no place to learn it.
Yeah,
No
yeah.
way.
I know he was a master manipulator, and you got to wonder that he probably picked that skill up just in his early teens. And
Absolutely.
To survive.
to survive, right?
Right.
So he knew. I read something where he knew exactly what to say to somebody to like either tickle their fancy or to assert dominance. He pretty much knew how to read somebody right off the bat. And
Well, I think going
them.
back to you go. I think, and we've said this before. Here's a guy that is the epitome of evil. if you want to say that,
Sure.
of evil, of what we would think of as evil.
Right.
But you go, was he born that way? No. In a sense, he was, because what he was born into.
It's a product of
But
society.
he was a product of his
Right.
childhood.
Yeah.
He was a product of society. Society puts children in situations where how can you be surprised that someone turns into that kind of an adult when this is there was nothing to catch that kid. You know what I mean? There was nothing to catch.
Yeah,
that kid.
it's not like he had some brain disorder or a chemical imbalance.
No.
This is what are the nature versus nurture argument, right?
Correct.
Man.
You know, it was interesting that you said that he was a product of society, because his last words when he died was, "I'm the most famous person alive." So I really do think, like, I don't necessarily agree if I think that it wasn't some chemical imbalance or disorder. I think he truly was a narcissist through and through. Like, I think that maybe he turned into that way because it's clear, like, anybody who looks at people, sees their weaknesses, identifies those weaknesses as a way to manipulate someone, and then is like, "I'm your leader now, listen to me, if I will have all your answers." I think that's a narcissistic personality in itself. And I think a lot of the stuff that I found out about him, about how weird he was, and like how he was very much like into the helter-skelter stuff, and we all know about that. For me, I didn't realize that was as serious as it was. Like, for growing up, from being a kid, I thought it was a CD. Like, in my reality, I heard of a CD.
Helter-skelter.
Yeah, and this entire process was a learning experience for me, because it was like a CD, and then I remember briefly, like, there was like a scary movie about it, and I didn't realize that it was as severe. And I think with him, he didn't believe in sanity in general, and like what I found out is he very much is a product of society, but he is the outskirts of society. One of his most famous quotes is, "Sanity is a small box, insanity is everything." So like it's hard for me to follow this guy, because he wants you to believe that he is sane, but he also is telling you that sanity is a small box and insanity is everything. So like, I'm just very confused by this character, and the more that I learned about him just made me more and more confused, to be honest with you. And like, I know I don't like the guy at all, because I don't like the style of manipulation and identifying weaknesses, and like all his followers just seems like people who've all gone through trauma.
Yeah, he's picking people just like him.
Yeah, and it was just kind of crazy. And like the fact that like he carved a swastika in his head, like,
as did a lot of his followers when they were doing the trials.
Yeah, and
they
like
all had crosses in their head.
And I am like, you want me to believe that that's sane, but that's also insane. And it's just like, where are we going? Where are we going? And I'm just very confused about Charles Manson and him. And like, he just checks off all the boxes of like what someone says when they're very much struggling. Like, it sounds like he turned to drugs for comfort, because there was no comfort in his life. He went through this situation, like, I think that you'll touch on it a little bit, with like in jail and being manipulated by the government through some like experimentations while he was in jail for his petty theft crimes.
This one, Susan Atkins, she came from a middle class family. She's the second of 3 children to John and Jean, who were alcoholics. So her parents were alcoholics. She moved around from, at the age of 13, the whole family, well, her mum died of cancer, Her mum died of cancer in 64. She would have been about 16 years old then. Her mother died, and at that point, family members were helping to take care of her, but they didn't really want to. And her dad, he checked out. They eventually moved when she was 21, I believe.
Okay.
She decided to go to California with some of her friends from school, 3 friends. That's where she met Manson, in a house. He was playing guitar and stuff. And she was a loyal member.
Yeah.
She helped with the Tate murders. She helped with Gary Hinman. And she eventually was the one that got them caught, because she ran her mouth after they got arrested at one point. Like the house where they were living got raided, and they were arrested. She started singing to a couple of cellmates who told the guards.
Like
and
literally singing, or
No.
I thought you meant like she was just singing. Well,
She
because they had that
just
weird
told
scene of them holding
all of
hands,
her
I don't know.
antics, like helping with the
Okay.
Tate murders. That's where she was saying that she wrote "pig" in Sharon Tate's blood.
Oh, so she was just like bragging to
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
Which is, by the way, that's how most murders are solved, by the way.
Because they just can't keep their mouths
There's always
shut.
somebody that can't
Well,
keep
the
their
2
mouth shut.
women in the cell that she reported it to, that she told, they ended up getting 25,000 reward money for helping her put them away. But
Oh, well.
and one of the youngest member, Diane Lake, she was 14 at the time when she joined, and she was from, her family actually weren't alcoholics or anything. Well, not at the beginning. Her dad was a artist. He wanted to go to Berkeley, so he traded. He didn't even sell the house. He traded the house for a trailer, a 23-foot trailer, to take him to Berkeley so that he could do a master's in art. He wanted his art degree. But the car couldn't pull the trailer, and it broke down like 20 miles away, so they ended up living in a trailer park. And then he got helped out. The dad got helped out with a studio, which were doing okay for a couple of years, but he was a smoker, and the studio burnt down. So then he got all depressed, and at this time she was 12, 13.
Okay.
And Dad was out there drinking and stuff, and at 14 years old she met Manson and joined the commune.
At
and
14.
14.
Yeah,
she
he had,
was the
he had a lot of
youngest
young
member.
people in his cult.
And she actually was the one who, she was the key witness in the trials, the 14-year-old.
Oh,
She
wow.
ended up being taken in by the officer, one of the officers that raided. It wasn't until, okay, so after the murders, I think it was Tex showed her a newspaper saying like, we did this and keep your mouth shut, kind of threatening like, and she was scared to say anything. She's like, if they can kill strangers, they can easily kill her. She's only 14 years old. What does she know, you know?
Right.
So it
That's-
wasn't until the place got raided twice within a couple of weeks, and it was on the second raid that she got arrested. Like the night of the murders, she was in jail. She wasn't there at the night of the murders. She'd already been arrested, and then when she got let go, he showed her the paper, and she's like, okay, I'm not gonna, how can I get away from here? I can't get away.
Right.
So it wasn't until the second raid, when she got arrested and separated from everybody, that she told them.
So she worked with the police, the prosecutors.
Yeah, she was the key
Okay.
witness in the trial that ended
Okay.
up putting them all away.
Wow.
Yeah. And she was 16 at the time, because like she'd been with him for 2 years.
So all of this with his cult, this all transpired in like 2 or 3 years.
2 to 3 years, yeah.
Like all of this chaos just happened.
There's a lot of things leading up to it too, but yeah, I mean they were staying on the place called Spahn Ranch, which I believe they kind of took over from George Spahn.
Yeah,
Right.
they were helping him out. Like he was
was
getting
okay.
older.
I guess I think he was kind of not all there though.
Yes, exactly.
And they
So
were
he's very old.
He thought they were helping him.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
like taking care of the land, helping him, and okay.
Taking care
taking
of
care
the
of his
farmland.
health, really.
Oh, they were like literally taking care of
One
him.
of the members
He was convinced that they were.
was supposedly looking after.
There's a lot of that.
giving
A lot
him
of
aid.
a lot of like trading going on with these guys.
No money, more barter.
Yeah, that's what like we were talking about with the Waco cult. There's people that had great income in that cult, and this one was mostly counterculture. This was young kids off the streets.
Going out
they were
robbing.
useful. They would go out and do things to get money, but there was no like class system here, no hierarchy of wealth. Go out there and earn money and bring it back to the church. Nothing like that going on. It was a gang. It was more of a gang, I would say. It felt like a gang. And then once you started to apply an ideology, that's when I think it starts to form into a cult. And now we should talk about the fact that he used methamphetamines and he used LSD himself, obviously, but he also would dose most of his family, I guess you call them, the family.
His family liked that, right? Like that they were about it.
He would go on rants for hours and hours, and there's a certain element of, you could say, it was mind control, and it was mind control using mind altering drugs, which is so much more powerful, And I'm talking high doses of LSD, not like, let's go to a fucking concert, guys, have some fun. Like dangerous levels of LSD to children too, to people under the age of 18.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, when you don't really have a full idea of the world, this man would be able to shape your reality pretty easily with those kind of drugs.
It sounds like they're also looking for some type of, I hate to say it this way, but some type of father figure as well in this very artistic family.
The Manson family.
Family man, is doing all the things.
Like I said, he was a master manipulator. He knew how to. I saw one. It's kind of funny, but it was there was some guy. He basically told him he was manipulating him with the women of the cult. He was letting the women sleep with this guy, and I think they were trying to get money out of this guy. But one thing he said to him to try to like tickle his fancy was basically like the reason why you keep all the girls around because you have a big penis. So like this appealed to the guy, like that just kept him in the loop and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So he always found his way. He knew how to press people,
right?
And people that were not really in the cult either. Like,
So he's like, I like your dick,
and he was an industry,
right?
He was like an industry man too, like in the sense of like he knew a lot of people in this California industry. Like he was, he was a failed musician, stuff like that,
right?
The thing that I always found so peculiar was that, like we were talking about, it seemed like there was a point, I don't know if we could find like the exact point, but it seemed like he kind of goes off the beaten path and starts like a vindictive type of behavior, where he's exacting vengeance on people that fucked him over, where he's using his family, his cult, to go and kill people or hurt or harm people that he had a personal vendetta against, which I don't know why he did that,
It's like he truly snapped. Like, you could say he probably wasn't sane in the first place, but his insaneness, like,
he's taking
completely...
copious amounts of LSD as well.
That had to be the cause of it.
Yeah.
I mean... Or do you think it was an incident?
I think it was all of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think you have to take the culture of the time into how this all came about. And I think that I'm the only one who was kind of a teenager during that time.
Yeah.
Right.
You have up until 65, you have a culture that is very rigid, very strict, very conservative, very evangelical Christian church culture, okay? And all which was heaped in sexism and racism to the 10th damn power. It was a white Christian, country, and the powers to be had that. Well, the Vietnam War started, and the Civil Rights Movement, which was all bubbling at the same time. It opened up this counterculture, what they called movement, okay? So all of a sudden, you had young people expressing themselves in ways that no one had ever seen in this country before. And so you had all kinds of weird offshoot kind of shit going on. I mean, really, they would, I know people that talked about actually being in Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco, the flower children. They said it was glamorized that way, but it really looked like a homeless camp. Okay. It was very smelly and dirty and funky, and but it was just you know, it was, you know, that drop out, you know, drop in, drop out, you know, kind of attitude. So there was a part of the youth movement, that was rebelling against
the establishment.
And the biggest part of it, I think, more than civil rights, was the Vietnam War.
Yes.
And so there was this huge movement that way. And then the drugs popped in. Mm-hmm. And we'd never seen drugs being done in mass like this, okay? So you had all these Timothy Learys and, you know, these different people popping up that were, you know, very vocal and were spouting these, you know, I don't know, these new ways of thinking.
Okay.
And creating these big groups of people that were so drawn to anything.
Just looking for something.
Anything. So all of a sudden you have here's Charles Manson. He's a criminal. He's a stone fucking criminal. He is a product of the streets. He is he's a survivor, and he's charismatic. Okay, he has learned through his development how to be charismatic, probably as a survival skill more than anything else. Now, here's a guy that comes from nothing. Nothing. Okay. All of a sudden he's out in California and all this shit's happening. He wants to be a musician, so he wants to do something. He works his way into Dennis Wilson's home. Mm-hmm. The Beach Boys. The fucking Beach Boys are the biggest shit out there. You know, one of them,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And he and some of the family, like, he's already created some of the group, some followers, which are mostly young women.
Right.
And he's made his way. He got a chance meeting, I think, with Dennis's manager or agent, and got in the house, and somehow Dennis liked this weird fucking group, and they're hanging in his fucking house.
Right.
And, you know, he actually gets a song published on one of their albums, you know, and thinks, you know, so here's this guy finally is now going, I'm finally somebody. I'm getting some attention, and I've got a little group of young women that I'm starting to control. Let's grab another one. Let's grab another one. Let's grab another one. Let's grab another one. You know, and then he took, from what I understand, he got into Scientology very early on.
Which is the fringe psychology.
He loved that science fiction novel, Stranger in a Strange Land.
Mm-hmm.
Between Scientology, Stranger in a Strange Land, lyrics from the Beatles, okay, and the Bible, he took all of those and through bastardizing those concepts, he created his own message. And you look at all these people that were his followers, these are also disturbed young people looking for something. They're runaways. In a lot of cases, they're looking for protection. They're looking for somebody who's going to feed and clothe them, who's going to put them in a house.
Purpose.
And once they're in there, it's like, play the game.
Yeah.
And play the game. And I think that it just became a domino effect of him getting that. And then through that, he got the right little group of people.
Oh, yeah.
All people ain't going to go kill for you.
Right.
That's a rare group. But he found Charles Tex Watson, who was a standout high school athlete, went to college, was in a fraternity, was visiting California, seeing one of his damn frat brothers. Not the type of person you think is going to go fucking kill people, but he was. And also some of the girls were of, had that mindset, however that worked out. And I think a lot of it with Manson to me was I can see him, more and more now, he's getting more emboldened and more pumped up, call it narcissism or whatever.
Okay.
He's getting more pumped. He's finally getting, he's somebody.
His
he's
beliefs
somebody.
are being confirmed.
Exactly right. And so there's a part of it, and he's not the only one that did. A lot of these colors, I think there's a part of it that goes, let's see how far we can take this.
Right.
How far can I get these people to go? What will they do for me? And I'm sure in his mind, he's never going to prison for this because he ain't doing that.
I didn't do
I didn't do nothing, man.
There's a fun aspect of that too, though.